men teachers, male nurses, all kinds of things. People, they never look at it. What about women today? Do you think that women are as attractive? Do they make themselves attractive to younger men, in your opinion? Or are there things that you would like to change or that you see as more aspirational about the way that they could relate in the dating world today? Or is it...
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there is an obesity epidemic, and attraction is important to men and women. Number two, I think 1/4 of women, according to a statistic I heard, are on some sort of psychiatric medication, and so a lot of men have had very bad experiences. And I also think from...
Could you tell us, I mean, not from your personal experience, but just what are some from your friend, or just, you know, just in general, like what are some of the bad experiences do you think that men have with women today?
Bipolar women, just doing crazy things, having affairs. I won't get specific.
Well, now, when I interviewed young men, they all told me, one of them told me that 8 out of 10 women today are sketch. In other words, they just will run off sketch, you know, they're sketchy, they'll run off on you, and they'll just do anything to you that you can't trust them. Do you find that?
One of the problems is that from a very young age, from elementary school, all the teachers are female, mostly, and there's not this sort of, there's such a push to have a female-centric view of the world, or, you know, which I think was maybe making up for some imbalances in the past, but that women actually have a hard time relating to some of the challenges that men go through. And the suicide rate is astronomically higher for men. I mean, how many people would really know that?
Well, it's 30,000 men a year, and there's 38,000 suicides. 30,000 of those are men, and going back to the empathy point, I think that's really correct. When I talk to women, almost never, they can always understand the female point of view, almost never can they take the male side. Do you find that in just relating?
Yeah, absolutely. Relating to men, and I also have to say that dating, frankly, is a pain in the ass. I mean, you go out, you spend all this time and energy, and most of the experiences are just not very good. And what happens for a lot of men is, I think that a lot of men just check out. And this goes
and they
to
play video games, and maybe they go down and start playing, looking at porn, whatever.
Because our time is valuable. It's one of the most valuable commodities there is. And if you're going to spend all this time on these bad experiences again and again and again, eventually a lot of men just check out and say, you know what? It's not for me. I'd rather do X, Y, or Z. It could be video games. It could be working out. It could be reading. It could be getting another degree, whatever it is. But
not to personalize this too much, but I'm curious when young men say, I don't want to get married, which I totally understand. Is there in your mind some woman that you would marry? Is there, like, in your mind, is there the shape and form and behavior of a woman who, if you met her, you would say, oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, but we also tend to idealize things as humans. And so we go, oh, yeah, that would be ideal. And then you actually get in that situation. It's not ideal.
Got it.
So,
what do you think men have too high of expectations then of women, maybe from some of the culture?
I think it's slightly different than that. I think it's just the superabundance of choice, right? I mean, in the old days, you would have a small town or a small village. There'd be 6 women in the village that were appropriate age for you to marry. It'd be one of these 6, and it's Mary Lou. You had your eye on in 2nd grade, and you watched her go dancing with somebody else in 6th grade, and you felt like your head was going to explode. And so there's just so many choices that the second you see the slightest little thing that's a little off-putting, say, I'll just change a channel. It's not 3 channels anymore, 70 million channels on YouTube. But in the time it takes you to watch a YouTube video, 3,000 new videos have been uploaded, or 30. So there's a lot less tolerance for this, but I think it's a deeper issue. And I think, as I've gotten a little older at this, I think what's really missing is this idea of courtship, and especially the idea of delayed gratification. Because when you look at why so many of our grandparents' marriages lasted as long as they did, it's because they had so much invested in it before they actually tied the knot. You would send a letter to someone that you had the hots for, and you wouldn't hear back from them for 10 days. And you just had to think for 10 days, what are they thinking? I get to go over. You'd have a 6-month courtship where you might be allowed to hold hands if grandmother was walking behind. And it made you step it up. And the one thing that I found really just very recently in my life is that the thing actually that I thought I was looking for is not what I was looking for. It's the friendship. It's the fact that when you're talking to this person, you just talk forever. No one has that experience anymore. Everybody's in a much more kind of fast. I got to. You don't get a chance to develop the depths of understanding that you used to in the old days by just having to wait and want. That's the word, really. It's just this desire, this want. It's like, I sent a letter, I won't hear back from her for 4 days, and you just build up a sort of perceived value that becomes real value over time.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to just say, what about texting and that kind of stuff? Do you find with your generation, like people, there's a lot of texting? I mean, it seems like with dating, that's a really hard situation. Like, I've even seen couples, I mean, you meet on Match.com, then you meet up, and then next thing you know, people are texting, you're talking to somebody all the time, and I just wonder how that plays a part. Instead of, like you said, waiting 10 days for a letter, you're instantly able to talk with the person back and forth all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of related to the Tinder and the Match.com, and that is you have thousands of choices. This goes to what Bill was saying. And if someone makes one little mistake or that text was kind of, what, you're not being sensitive, all of a sudden it turns into...
Is it on the woman's part or on your part? You feel the same way. Like, if you see something weird about her, you would maybe be like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want her. Or,
I mean, I know I have plenty of issues. I'm not perfect.
You're not?
I'm not, believe it or not. But
I have a list, actually.
People have a hard time looking inward at themselves and seeing their own issues. But obviously I date women, and so that's been my experience, and it has been, you're bad, next person, I'll scan 2,000 profiles online or whatever, and just move on to the next.
Swipe left.
The thing that kind of worries me about this conversation as we have it is that having been married so long and believing that feminism is entirely wrong in all of its premises, one of the things that I've come to see is that I only see half the world. That men have a way of looking at the world that is only 50% of the way you can look at the world, and women have are in possession of the other half. And it's only over a long period of time with a woman having to try and make her happy, try and have her make you happy, that you start to see that other half of the world that is reality.
But I think what feminism does, and I think there are some good things about it, but I think what it does is it makes it so that men are the other half of the world that they don't see. Used to, I think women had to understand a little bit more about the male psychology, and now they do not.
But that's true on the other side, too. If men stay single, I don't think they ever learn that they're only seeing half the world.
So, the definitive, if you wanted to put the destructiveness of feminism into one sentence, it would be, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Well, guess what, girls? You're getting your world without bicycles, and you don't seem to be very happy about it, I've noticed, right? I mean, you've made this case. This is, I think, the fundamental problem, is that I think feminists assume that equality must mean identicality. That in order for them to be equal, they have to be identical. And I think the mature position is to take is that you can have people who are in fact equal, but equal because of their complementing differences, and that this is what makes things happen. I was having a conversation last night, so you mentioned this. You were talking about that women see the world in an entirely different way. Their brains are wired for emotions in a way that we just don't comprehend, and conversely. And I was saying that I've got this intellectual matrix, and when I learn new data, I know exactly where it goes in my intellectual matrix. But when I learn something new from her, it goes into an emotional matrix that I'm just now learning how to build. And it is, in fact, that it's an EQ, it's an intelligence, an emotional quotient. It's an entirely different thing. And men are expected to learn this if they're going to be in a monogamous relationship. I think if women made more of an effort to understand the male perspective the way they used to in the olden days, we'd be a lot happier.
I also think, by the way, the entire idea of equality between persons is a nonsense. I think it's just you're just talking gibberish when you talk about equality between persons. Persons are never equal. They're never the same. They're different. And I think that it's really interesting having lived among kind of standardized old-fashioned couples. Those homemakers are some of the most empowered and dignified women that I know, whereas many of the working women I know are the pawns of some boss who doesn't care about them at all. And so a lot of things that the feminists told us are exactly the opposite.
He's too busy, so he hires some bitch to do it for him.
How do you think this is going to affect the future? Because now we're hearing that 25% of all millennials will not be married by the time they reach their mid-50s.
Bummer.
How do you think, how is this going to look? Even from an emotional point of view, like you were saying, Bill, are young men not going to really even know how to relate and vice versa? Or do you think it'll be, Matt, do you think that women and men, how do you think they'll relate, say, if they never marry and they don't understand the other point of view?
There's going to be huge economic consequences because one of the things my father talked about is when you have a kid, all of a sudden your whole world changes and there's another human being that you have to look out for, you have to protect, you have to provide for, and you're willing to go work that much harder to protect and provide for that child, for that human being. And so if guys are just checking out, all of a sudden there's a huge ramifications for that people don't even realize. I think that some of this is cyclical. I think there maybe has to be a generation that doesn't get married and other people, the next generation comes up and sees that and goes, I don't want that for me. I do want to get married. I'll work that much harder. So maybe some of this is a little cyclical.
Right. So just to wrap up, what would make marriage, just quickly in a couple words, what would make marriage more attractive to men and to women?
I'm so old-fashioned that I don't even know if I'm talking into the world as it is anymore, but I certainly think that, home and family are wonderful. I don't know what my life would be like without a home, without a family. I think that some dedication to that is going to come from women, and the idea that they are somehow not supposed to feel that way. I hear women say this all the time. I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I daydream about a man rescuing me. I know I'm not supposed to say this. And I always think, who told you? Who had the right to tell you what you're supposed to dream about, what you're supposed to think about? So I think that offer, that life of home life and fidelity and affection and a place to go at the end of the day, I think that's still a powerful draw. But if women don't want to provide it, it ain't going to be provided because men want to.
It's gone.
What do you think would make marriage more attractive?
I think we need to listen to men. I mean, so many of the people that are speaking out on this topic are women like you or the Honey Badgers or gay men like Jack Donovan. And we just need more heterosexual men to come forward and talk about what they want and what they need and talk about, obviously they're having struggles and they need to feel like they're in a safe environment. There's so much political correctness that just kind of shuts that conversation down and says, shut up. That we need to, let men speak and be themselves.
Great point.
If I had to define the pathology of the dating scene, you're pretty much in LA. You're pretty much at the apex of the Western pyramid of narcissism, right? So when I describe the dating scene in LA, I say everything's nutty here because the men are weak and the women are angry. And angry women make men weak, and weak men make women angry. And so many of these things are in this kind of feedback loop. I can't do much about what women think, but I've actually given serious thought to starting an academy for young men, and it would basically just consist of this. Guys, come here, listen up. We're faster, we're stronger, we're tougher. We're wired for adventure. We're wired to protect. We're wired to do all these things. And we do these things, and you know what you get in return for this? Nothing. You know what you're entitled in exchange for this? Nothing. Those are the cards. That's the hand. And I would just simply say to them, women cannot emasculate you. Women cannot take away your confidence. Women cannot take away anything from you. You're not going to give that power to anybody. That's something that you have to give up. So just be who you are. If you want to make a gun out of a branch when you're a little boy, that doesn't mean you're a defective girl. That means you are training for the things that nature has prepared you to do, to protect the weak from other bad men. And my great fear in all of this, Helen, and this is essentially what you write about all the time, it's my great fear, is that this feminist idea of eliminating masculinity because so much violence comes from men is not going to work. If you eliminate masculinity from men, you will not have any good men. And the only way to defend the weak and women from the horrible depredations of bad men is to create a crop of good men who have that same physical ability to defend them. If you take masculinity out of a culture to eliminate the violence that bad men produce, you're not going to end up with a culture without violence. You're going to end up with a culture where there is nothing to protect the innocent and the good from the violence. And I know this is how Andrew feels about this. This is an obligation that comes to us with manhood, and it is not maleness. It's manhood is the ability to say, I want to run from these Mongol sons of bitches just as much as the next guy, but the women and children are going to go that way, we're going to go this way, and that's the deal. Now, it used to be that we got something for that deal. We used to get a little respect and a little admiration for that deal, but if you're going to take that away, it starts to make the whole thing seem a little less attractive.
Well, on that,
It's always been a disgrace, man. It was a sermon.
I guess we better end. Thank you so much to Bill Whittle, Andrew KLAVAN, and Matt Orr today. This is Helen Smith at PJTV. Thanks for watching.